We're currently joined by Sun Sentinel Heat beat writer Ira Winderman. And Ira, not a championship season, not a playoff season, but a historic season. And normally, those all don't go together. What do you take away from this season?
You know, I put it this way. I think it was a fulfilling season, or a fulfilling second half of the season. I mean, it's crazy. If you would have told me 2 months, 1 month, 2 weeks ago, the Heat are going to finish 41-41 and be home watching the playoffs, I would have said, no way, not in this Eastern Conference. And obviously, it didn't end the way they wanted. But it ended with a record that told people that, hey, if you want a team committed to victory that'll push itself, this was that team. And the emotion, as we saw in the locker room after the game, told you that this team cared about the second half of the season, cared about themselves, cared about the fans. It's odd to say it for a season that doesn't have playoffs, but I think it was a pretty special moment at the finish.
It really was, to see all those players come out, the tears in their eyes, the dejection feeling. It was just an uncumbersome locker room, if you want to say that. But let's turn our attention now to free agency, because a lot of players want to know who's coming in. Mickey Arison, the team owner, may have tipped his hand with his Instagram account. Take a look at this picture. It's Dion Waiters and James Johnson alongside the team owner with a statement that reads, "The Heat future looks very bright." Ira, is he tipping the hand here?
Well, I put it this way. I think as much as anything, Mickey is an optimist. I think you see that in that picture there. Remember, last summer, Mickey Arison also told us he was looking forward to Chris Bosh coming to training camp. So you take the optimistic bet. Remember a year ago, the Heat spoke about how much they wanted Luol Deng and Joe Johnson back. Well, we saw Joe Johnson Saturday night beat the Clippers with that last shot while playing for the Utah Jazz. You can want something to happen. You can have the best feeling about a player, but as we know, July 1, when free agency starts, everyone's out for their own also. I think what the Heat have is this. They have a sense from James Johnson and Dion Waiters, because they said this during the season, if everything is equal, they want to come back. Well, will everything be equal? Will someone offer 13, 14, 15, 16 million? Luol Deng, 18 million last summer. The money still talks at the end of the day. The Heat feel very good about this group. They would love James Johnson back. They would love Dion Waiters back. But you know what? They'd also love to finish better than 41-41.
Very true. Now, who is on Pat Riley's radar?
Well, that's where it gets fascinating. We saw the whole Carmelo Anthony show over the weekend on Friday. Phil Jackson, what he said in New York is hard to believe. Look, Pat Riley is going to explore every option. Last summer, remember, the Heat were one of 6 teams to meet with Kevin Durant, even though they were a long shot and really didn't have much chance. So what Pat Riley is going to do right now, he's listing his roster 1 through 15 priority-wise. He's looking at every free agent. What happens with Gordon Hayward in the playoffs? What happens if these Clippers come apart and Chris Paul might leave and Blake Griffin might leave? So he's going to look at everyone and anyone. But I do think, based on what Mickey Arison showed in that tweet, what Pat Riley said at the end of the season, they really enjoyed this team. They would like to strengthen this team, add another piece also, but they need to wait till July 1 to see what's there. 2 weeks before that, see what's there in the NBA draft.
I'm just shaking my head, because when you talk about Spo liking this team and the fact he was almost in tears in his post-game press conference.
Emotional.
Just keeping the core of this team together, what they've built. Why would you bring in Carmelo Anthony, who has proved to be cancerous in locker rooms?
Well, there's 2 points there. The one thing we know, why would you bring in Shaquille O'Neal, who proved to be cancerous with the Lakers? Well, that worked out pretty well. Alonzo Mourning, different attitude, came in with the Heat. Tim Hardaway, we've seen that. Even James Johnson and Dion Waiters, we've seen all of that. So again, what you have to say is this. The Miami Heat finished the season at 30-11 over the second half of the season. Right. Does that translate, honestly, into 60-22? If you believe that, you don't change anything. But I don't think everyone believes that. So they're somewhere between 41-41 and the second half of the season. This is when you go through the analytics and say to yourself, let's be honest. What we saw over the second half of the season, is that sustainable, or do we need more? And I think they honestly know. They're sitting home. 16 of 30 teams are in the playoffs. They need more.
They went 30-11 without Justise Winslow. Is he a movable piece?
See, that to me is the most fascinating name of this offseason right now, because they did so much without Justise. Had the shoulder surgery, missed the second half of the season. He is still attractive around the league. What role does Justise Winslow have on this team? Would he be accepting of being, I think he'd be a terrific sixth-man defender off the bench to round out this roster, especially if you're starting James Johnson? Or is he a trade chip that when you leave the lottery, you only have a 0.5% chance of moving to number 1, 1.8% chance chance of a top 3 pick. Could you say to a team, we'll give you number 14 in Justise Winslow. We want to get to 3, to 5, to 7, and maybe make a move for a younger player? Or does Eric Spoelstra say to himself, you know what? In this game, in this game, in this game, if I only had Justise Winslow, we would have gotten that extra victory or 2 we needed for the playoffs. I think he is the swing state, the swing player in how the Heat approach this offseason.
And he might be a chip, like we were discussing earlier, that they could potentially move up in the draft.
Yes.
This is a very heavy point guard draft. And Goran Dragic isn't getting any younger, now 31 years old. So to be able to have that nice piece, that backup with a lot of skill and potential would be great for the future.
And there's not a lot of flexibility there. They don't have a lot of future picks. Remember, they owe 2 picks to Goran Dragic, 4 Goran Dragic to the Suns going forward. So they don't have a lot to offer elsewhere. So the few things they have to be careful about. Maybe Tyler Johnson, if you say to yourself, hey, Josh Richardson was really good the last 2 weeks of the season. Maybe we can move that. The one thing the Heat have now is plenty of time to figure out their game plan, that on July 1, when it starts, they know what direction to go.
Now, I had a chance to speak to Udonis Haslem following the season finale there, and he says this is the best coaching job Eric Spoelstra has done, even during the Big 3 era. Now, do you believe he belongs as Coach of the Year?
Well, I would put it this way. Do I believe he belongs in the discussion? Absolutely. Getting a team to 500 after sitting at 11-30. But let's also be honest. 16 of 30 teams make the playoffs. I think it has to go to a playoff coach. I think Eric deserves and will get votes. The ballots have 3 names on there. I think he should be, if not win, at place or show in there. He deserves that. But you know what? The respect comes from the final record and from that locker room, because these players swear by that coach. And in these days of coach and players sort of pulling apart, I think that was the most refreshing thing. To see someone who cares that deeply, I think means something.
All right, this is a topic I know you and I disagree on.
Okay.
The fact of resting players. It drives me absolutely nuts. Families spend good money to go into a game, and they don't get to see the likes of LeBron James, or even the other night when the Heat had the playoffs on the line, needing 2 teams to lose.
And
not necessarily meaning
right.
they would, but Brooklyn, last place. They already optimized as many lottery balls as they could potentially get, and they rest players. What is going on in this league? Because this seems like a black eye Adam Silver has to deal with.
Yeah, I think the way the season ended, just to go back, if the Heat not only needed the victory, they got over the Wizards, but they needed Atlanta or Brooklyn to lose. Atlanta I had no problem with, because if a player gets injured on the eve of the playoff, you go, why did you play that player? Let's face it. Right. If the Heat would have played LeBron or Dwayne or Bosh during the big 3 years and one of them is injured in a meaningless season finale, I understand that. Brooklyn had nothing to play for. They're not in a lottery. They traded their first-round pick to Boston. They were not going to the playoffs, and yet they're resting their players. Resting for what? Resting until October? The one thing I will say is this. We now know there are certain players who are going to play the resting game. So if you're buying tickets to see LeBron, if you're buying tickets to see a player like that, it really is a caveat emptor thing going forward. LeBron's going to have 2 games next season in Miami. He might decide not to play them. Don't go out to StubHub and pay the big money on that and only get face value back. At least now we know. It's not a good look for the NBA, but I think the consumer also has to be smart about it.
You know, it really ripped my heart out the other day during Monday's game against the Cavaliers. I saw a young man, a handicapped young man, in a wheelchair sitting courtside, his LeBron James socks on, his LeBron James jersey on, and his dad didn't really have an explanation of why LeBron James wasn't on the floor. If it was up to me, I would have those players have to go sit
That's a good point.
Upstairs and have sign autographs for the whole entire first half in order to make it up to them, just so they make sure they're on the floor.
I don't know if you can go that far, but you're right. When you know there's special considerations and special moments like that, maybe that's at least a part of a way. So you know what? The NBA can send that out that, hey, LeBron didn't play in Miami, but look, for young Jimmy, he went out of his way or do something like that. At least you make the look a little bit better.
He's Ira Winderman, Sun Sentinel. Next time we'll probably hear from you on this, coming up tomorrow as the Heat, well, they go into the locker room and start cleaning out.
Closing up the lockers, done for the season. Yeah. Then we'll talk again after they win the lottery and beat the odds, after I win Powerball.
Sounds good, Ira. Thanks.
Thank you.